Hello, I'm Cass. Welcome back to my booktube channel. I managed to read 117 books. A lot of these books I read in vlogs or talked about in wrap-ups. Therefore, if you're wanting a more in-depth review about any of these books, you can probably find a vlog or a wrap-up on my channel where I do discuss them in detail. But before we begin the talking about every single book that I read portion, I am going to discuss some statistics with y'all. I am such a stats girly through and through. I love collecting data about myself. I don't know what it is. It just is so fun. Get ready for a bunch of graphics to pop on the screen. Now, the first percentage we're going to talk about is my new reads versus the rereads that I've had. Now, I used to have a major rereading problem. I think it was something like 60+% of my books, I think it was 2 years ago now, were all rereads. However, this year I did pretty good and only 30.8% of the books that I read were rereads, which means that 69.2% of my reading this year were brand new reads, brand new books that I've never read before. This percentage is very exciting for me because it shows that I'm not just rereading my old faves like I used to, and I always love when the percentages look a little bit like this. That means I returned to some old favorites when I wanted to, but also discovered so many new favorites as well. In terms of pages that I read 46,648 pages, meaning that on average I read 128 pages per day, which is really high, especially since I don't read every single day, but the thought of reading 120 pages per day is already like mind-blowing, but the fact that my page count averages to that is also kind of crazy. Now, I do tend to lean towards picking up longer books, and my statistics actually agree with that because the average book length was 398 pages. There's rarely any books that I pick up that aren't over 300 pages. That's a pretty accurate representation of where my reading was at this year. I mean, obviously the stats say so. My average star rating for this year was actually way higher than I thought it was. I did not include my rereads for this stat because I did that last year and it skewed my star rating so bad. Specifically because when I reread books, I tend to reread books that I either gave 5 stars or like a really high 4-star. I'm not gonna like reread a book that I gave a 3-star, and so it kind of skews the statistics a little bit. But of all the new books that I read, my star rating was 3.9, which was way higher than I anticipated and shows that I read some pretty solid books this year. Like, not quite a 4, like I was so close to an average 4-star, and honestly that's my goal. Like, obviously I want to read books that I enjoy, but getting to find and test the waters of different books is always really rewarding, because if I never try reading a genre that I'm not sure I'm gonna like, or a book that I'm not sure I'm gonna like, then I will never find like good books that I really love. Because if I never read those books to begin with, like I never would have found them. Does that make sense? That sounds a little convoluted, but anyway, 3.9 for the average star rating. This next one is one that might really expose me. It's the total number of books that I bought and the total number of books that I bought and read. So I bought 64 books this year, which honestly is way down from last year. I think last year I bought over 100, and that's one of my goals for the new year, is to be really picky about which books that I buy. And part of that is because I have to be a little tighter with my finances because I am taking a pay cut with this career change that I'm going into. So the amount of disposable income that I have compared to last year is quite a bit different. However, I think with me moving and then moving again, it's really made me think about the fact that I have to move all the books. So before I buy a book, I have to decide, like, is this something that I would want to lug across the country if I move again? Because getting rid of books is such a hassle, packing up books is such a hassle, and I know I talk about that so much, but like, look at the stack behind me. That's not even like a quarter of my collection. And the thought of moving it all over again, I know I keep talking and complaining about moving, but it's just where I'm at right now. Anyways, so 64 books I bought, but out of these 64 books that I bought, 48 of them I did read. So honestly, I am pretty proud of that ratio, and I think it can provide some like transparency that I'm not just like buying books to do book hauls or anything. Like, I actually do read the books that I buy. There is no problem with how you spend your money. It is your money. I just definitely urge people to be smart about their book consumption. I actually have a video coming out later about all the books that I bought and like the books that I read, and I go on a little tangent at the end of it talking about supporting your local libraries and not supporting these book talkers who haul a bunch of books and then unhaul them like a month later without reading them. Be smart, and if not smart, be mindful about your book buying. Please remember that the booktubers you watch and the book talkers that you watch, every single book that they buy, if they make money from YouTube or from TikTok or from any social media platform, they can use that as a tax write-off. So just remember that you do not need to match up to these book talkers. I'm especially talking about book talk. I'm not on book talk. I had no idea about the book talk overconsumption of books until I started watching like video essays on YouTube critiquing them. And then I even thought they were exaggerating until they popped up evidence of some of these book talkers like hauling 50 some odd books per month and then getting rid of like hundreds the next month. I'm like, why are we doing this? Anyways, sorry, I always get on a tangent about that because I'm just so passionate about like being authentic as a reader and not lying to your audience about like the number of books that you've read for like clout or anything like that, or hauling books because it's a clickable thumbnail so you want as many books in the thumbnail as possible. I just really hate it. And maybe I'm really passionate because I didn't like start a booktube channel to gain clout or anything. I've always been a reader, and I love that people are getting into reading through book talk, through booktube. Like I love that so much. Like do not get me wrong, and if you got into reading or back into reading through social media platforms, like I love that for you so much. But just don't be too influenced by the people you see online, please. Even me, please. Anyways, rant over. I'm sorry I keep going off in tangents. It's just something that is just like really in my mind lately. Anyways, and then comparing number of books I read versus like graphic novels and manga, which do count as reading. I don't know who is out there judging people saying that mangas aren't books, but they are. Audiobooks also count as books. Please don't get it twisted. And also, does it matter? 106 books versus 11 graphic novels and mangas. I really don't pick up that many mangas. I want to. I don't know. I feel like I'm so picky about manga because there's all these popular series that people keep recommending to me and I'm like, yeah, and then they have like 50 plus volumes and I'm like, it's a little intimidating. I like, you know, good short mangas. My favorite manga is like 2 volumes. Well, 6, but I have 2 bind ups. Love orange. Now I'm just gonna pop up a few like graphs on the screen for just random statistics that I happen to be able to keep track of, starting with pages read per month. So you can kind of see that April was a month that I absolutely popped off with my reading, which is kind of crazy. Like I don't know how I read over 6,000 pages in April. I'm like, what did I even read? That was right before I moved too. So I'm like, I was so stressed. Like, when was I reading? Then we have the number of books that I read per month, and then the amount of books I read per month that were new books. The number of books that I bought per month. Honestly, this looks healthy, and you cannot convince me otherwise. This looks like a healthy amount of books per month. I'm just saying. And then I thought I'd also break down the number of books based on like their star ratings. So from 5 stars to 1 star, this is kind of what the graph looks like. Honestly, had more 5 stars than I expected, and then I had way more 2 stars than I expected, but no 1 stars, so honestly, I take that as a win. Anyways, that was like my little introduction and some stats. I hope you enjoyed listening to those. I just think it's kind of fun to include because I'm such a numbers gal, like I said. Love me some statistics. And it's fun to like look back and compare like year to year, like where I'm at. I always set reading goals, but they're always so loose because reading is a hobby for me. So I always set my goal as 100 on Goodreads, but I'm never working to hit that goal. I just happen to read that amount, and I've been setting that goal since 2019, I think. And some years I hit it, some years I didn't. I just happened to read a lot more this year because I was self-employed for like 4 months at the end of this year. I would read at my job, which my manager absolutely loved. And I also read fairly quickly. And I was running 2 book clubs at the beginning of the year. So I already automatically was reading 2 books per month. Sorry, again, I'm getting off topic, but I'm just really passionate about people like not thinking that this is some sort of competition. Again, anyways, moving on. I have my list in my reading journal here of all the books that I read this year. All right, I'm about to get real transparent with the reality of this video, okay? I started filming this video talking about every single book. I made it 14 books in. 14 before I was like, this is gonna take forever. I still have 113 books to discuss, and I've already been recording for an hour. I know it doesn't seem like it because I just chopped all of that footage out of this video. So like, you can't tell that I've been recording for an hour already, except for maybe my feigned enthusiasm about this video. So here's the deal. Let me talk about my star rating system. That way you can kind of tell how I rate books. And then I'm just gonna pop up every single book that I read this year with a star rating. And I'm just gonna read out the titles to y'all. And then you can kind of gauge whether or not you wanna read this book or not. Let's shoot for efficiency, shall we? So let's talk about how I rate books. 5 stars is the creme de la creme, okay? nearly perfection, if not perfection itself. A lot of the books that I rate 5 stars, absolutely love the character, love the plot. Writing's not a huge priority for me. People have won me over with bad writing, okay? But that's not to say like bad writing. Incorrect grammar, like questionable, that sort of thing. Anyways, so that's 5 out of 5. Like I would reread this book year round if I could, love it. I want to pick this book up at all times. Living in my head rent free. 4 stars is a book that I definitely would reread. It was very solid. It was near 5 stars, but there was something in it lacking, whether that be a certain maybe POV that I really didn't like and it really dragged down. Pacing. Pacing is usually what knocks off a star rating for me. If the pacing is not consistent throughout the book, or I feel like just drags and has lots of unnecessary information, or I feel like it could have been edited down 100 pages to make it better, typically it lands in the 4-star category. 3 stars have 2 categories of books. Either books that I really enjoyed for like a guilty pleasure reading, or they were just average, or books that I enjoyed a little bit less, but still would recommend for other people because they just weren't quite my cup of tea. So books that would typically be on like a 2.5 scale for me, sometimes I'll round up to a 3 because I'm like, I think people can get value out of this book and enjoy it. But for me personally, it didn't really click. I usually round up to a 3 for those types of books. And then we have 2 stars. 2 stars are typically really boring books, and most of the 2 stars that I actually had this year were books that I had to read, which could have also contributed to the lower ratings because maybe I wasn't in the mood to read it, but I needed to read it for my book club, which maybe isn't like the greatest thing, but it is the reality of what kind of happened this year. And 2 stars, like I said, they're typically boring books, books that are slow, books that I typically would DNF. I don't really try to force myself through books. I have too many other books that I would rather be reading to push through a book I'm not enjoying. But if I did push through and there was some element or some sort of potential that I sort of enjoyed it at some point, it typically gets a 2. Now, 1 stars are books that I finished solely to warn you away from. And like I said, I had no 1 stars this year, so we didn't have to worry about that. But let's go through month by month. I am going to just pop them up on the screen nice and efficiently for you. So if you want any like in-depth thoughts about these books, I have vlogs, I have reading wrap-ups like I had mentioned earlier. So let's get cracking, let's get to it. First book of January was The Toll by Neil Shusterman. Second book was Legend Born by Tracy Deonn. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. February, Book 8, Babel by R.F. Kuang. A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. The Queen's Gambit by Walter Tevis. Once Upon a Cape Prom by Kat Cho. Anyways, moving on. The Ruins of Gorlan by John Flanagan. 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. And March, Book 15, Iron Widow by Shirin J. Zhao. A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. The Burning Bridge by John Flanagan. Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare. Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Calvin and Hobbes by Bill Watterson. Orange, the Complete Collection Volume 1 by Ichigo Takano. Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. Stormglass by Jeff Wheeler. April, Book 25. Orange, the Complete Collection Volume 2 by Ichigo Takano. Orange Future by Ichigo Takano. The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. The Well of Ascension by Brando Sando. Spy Family Volume 9 by Tatsuya Endo. After the Fall by E.C. Myers. Before the Dawn by E.C. Myers. Roman Holiday by E.C. Myers. The Icebound Land by John Flanagan. Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. The Hero of Ages by Brando Sando. Well Met by Jen DeLuca. Well Played by Jen DeLuca. Well Matched by Jen DeLuca. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. And moving on to May, Book 41, Well Traveled by Jen DeLuca. The Alloy of Law by Brando Sando. I'll Be the One by Lila Lee. The Battle for Scandia by John Flanagan. Happy Place by Emily Henry. Laziness Does Not Exist by Devin Price. Belladonna by Adeline Grace. The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. Orange to You, Dear One by Ichigo Takano. Moving on to June, Book 50. Shadows of Self by Brando Sando. The Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. Love Theoretically by Allie Hazelwood. Chasing Red by Isabel Ronan. Moving on to July. July, book 57. Well Matched by Jen DeLuca. In the Likely Event by Rebecca Yarros. Well Traveled by Jen DeLuca. Under One Roof by Allie Hazelwood. Stuck With You by Allie Hazelwood. Below Zero by Allie Hazelwood. Tress of the Emerald Sea, Brandon Sanderson. Mistborn Secret History, Brando Sando. Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. K-Pop Confidential by Stephen Lee. K-Pop Revolution by Stephen Lee. Eric's Ransom by John Flanagan. The Sorcerer of the North by John Flanagan. The Siege of Mackinac by John Flanagan. The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. The Kings of Clonmel by John Flanagan. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. September, book 74. The Naturals, Jennifer Lynn Barnes. The Dragon Republic, R.F. Kuang. The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. A River Enchanted, Rebecca Ross. Twilight the Graphic Novel, Volume 1 by Young Kim. Twilight the Graphic Novel, Volume 2 by Young Kim. Vicious by V.E. Schwab. October, book 83. An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. The Long Game by Elena Armas. Well Met, Jen DeLuca. Well Played by Jen DeLuca. Fable, Adrian Young. Spy Family Volume 10 by Tatsuya Endo. Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. A Soul of Ash and Blood by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Ender's Shadow by Orson Scott Card. A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. The X-Hex by Aaron Sterling. Hunting Prince Dracula by Carrie Maniscalco. Fight Survive by Holly Jackson. November, book 98. A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Halt's Peril by John Flanagan. Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Check and Mate by Allie Hazelwood. A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldry. Namesake by Adrian Young. God Killer by Hannah Kaner. December, book 106. The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. The Emperor of Nihonja by John Flanagan. The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. The Infinite Sea, Rick Yancey. The Last Star by Rick Yancey. The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brando Sando. All You Need Is Kill by Hiroshi Sakurasaka and Takashi Obata. Big Panda and Tiny Dragon by James Norbury. Ruby, Fairy Tales of Remnant by E.C. Myers. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. And Red Rising by Pierce Brown. There are the books that I read this year. Sorry the format is a little bit different than a lot of people, how they talk about and hold up every single book. I just don't have it in me. I do not have it in me this year. I'm moving in 4 days. It's not happening. But I really hope that you enjoyed regardless of the change in format. And sorry for all like the tangents in the beginning of this video, but you know, some of it just had to be said. I also wanted to say that this is the first year that my most read author is not John Flanagan. It's actually Brando Sando. He took the top spot. I read 11 Brandon Sanderson books this year, and I only read 10 John Flanagan books this year. So I don't know who I am anymore because it's always been John Flanagan as my top author, so it's really weird that he's not. But Brando Sando took the top spot, rightfully so though. I think my Brandon Sanderson phase is not over, so be prepared to be sick of me mentioning Brandon Sanderson in 2024. But Happy New Year! Thank y'all so much for watching all the way to the end of this video. Please feel free to chat with me in the comments about everything and anything. I do hope to see you in my next one. And side note, my next videos, I think all the way through mid-February, end of February-ish, all of these are pre-recorded because I will be at flight attendant training from January to February. So wish me luck, hopefully things go my way, and then I will be a flight attendant if I survive training. We will see. But thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Toodles!